like, yes, I want him to be happy, of course, but I also want him to be miserable. That's why I bought this book. Hey y'all, what's up? I'm Sabrina and welcome back to my book nook. So today we're going to be doing a book review, which, oh my gosh, I haven't done in so long. So far, I've kept my New Year's resolution of reading every single day. Yay me. And I've already read 3 books so far, and it's been a week into the new year. I am on break and I have no life, if you cannot tell. I'm unemployed and every day I just rot in bed. But on the bright side, I did read a lot of books, and one of these books was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, which is what we're going to be reviewing today. So before I get started, let me just break down how my book reviews work if you're not familiar. So my book reviews are broken down into 4 parts. Parts 1 and 4 are spoiler free, but parts 2 and 3 are not. Part 1, I give my beginning thoughts and opinions, as well as a brief plot summary. Part 2, I share my thoughts on the plot, writing, and other elements. In Part 3, I talk about characters and relationships. And Part 4, I give a brief conclusion as well as my overall rating and answering the question, should you read this book? Okay, so without further ado, let's just get into the book review. Part 1, beginning thoughts and opinions. First off, this is kind of just a little tangent, but I'm super duper annoyed I didn't get this during the Barnes & Noble hardcover sale. I was debating it, but then I was like, maybe I should just read Divine Rivals first, because what if Divine Rivals is not good, then I just wasted money on a second hardcover. I'm disappointed with myself because I'm pretty sure this came out the exact same day the hardcover sale was, and I just missed out on it. And so when I finished Divine Rivals, I was like, oh my god, I need the sequel right now. And then I went to go see if it was in store, and they were sold out everywhere. So I had to wait a couple days for it to get here via shipping. Longest 3 days of my life. Ugh. Yeah, Divine Rivals was my first read of the year. This was my 3rd of the year. I read Iron Flame in between them, which, by the way, Iron Flame did not need to be 600 plus pages. What the fuck? Actually, fun fact, part of the reason I bought Divine Rivals was because a couple months ago when I finished Fourth Wing, I was looking for other books similar to that, and I was recommended Divine Rivals a lot. Disclaimer, if you just finished Fourth Wing and are looking for other books like that, do not read Divine Rivals. Those are like literally not similar at all. Like the only thing I think that's vaguely similar is that they both have magic and are kind of enemies to lovers, but they're not similar at all, because Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows is literally 10 times better than Fourth Wing in terms of writing. So for a little brief plot summary, obviously spoilers for Divine Rivals, but Ruthless Vows is a continuation of that story. Iris has returned back to Oath with Force, but she's still separated from Roman, who she thought she left for dead. But when given the chance to go back and report on the front lines and possibly search for him, she takes the chance. Roman, on the other hand, is alive, but he is brainwashed by Dacker. I don't know how to say it. Dacker? The god who him and Iris were originally fighting against, and he has no memories of anything that's happened at all. So Iris and Roman are kind of struggling to find each other and reconnect, all while this giant war is raging and getting dangerously closer and closer to their city, Oath. So moving on to part 2, thoughts on plot, writing, and other elements. I honestly thought that this was better than Divine Rivals, just by a little bit. I feel like the plot is a little bit more all over the place, but that kind of matches the frenetic energy that war often has and the kind of rapid pace that war moves at. You know, I will say that Rebecca Ross, her prose, absolutely phenomenal, especially for a YA fantasy book. Like, I remember I was reading Divine Rivals and reading Ruthless Vows, and I was kind of shocked at this elevated style of writing that the story was operating at. And I think that the prose of this book itself is kind of what sets it apart from other YA fantasy books. It doesn't feel as formulaic in that sense. You know, I feel like when you think of YA fantasy, you think of first person, kind of very confessional, very casual, lots of telling instead of showing. But I feel like Ruthless Vows and Divine Rivals strays away from that and is better in that sense. But I also kind of wanted to touch on the genre of this book, because it's not necessarily a criticism I have, I'm just like confused by it. So this book is labeled as YA historical fiction. I thought it was fantasy, but then I started thinking about it more and more, and I was like, I guess it kind of is historical fiction, because they have like typewriters and these old-timey ass descriptions of cars and roadies, but it's not though. because it's set in a magical world that doesn't exist. Do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, anyways, the genre typing of this book just confused me because I don't really know what genre it is. An actual criticism I did have of the book, however, is that there were times when I was reading this, and I also felt this during Divine Rivals, where I was honestly more interested in the gods' story than Iris and Roman's, specifically Dacre and Enva's story. I thought their mythology was honestly more compelling and more interesting and kind of more dynamic, offered a lot more of a moral gray area and a lot more intense relationship dynamics, and so I found myself kind of striving to read more about their relationship and see how their interactions play out over Iris and Roman's, which I felt like were a little bit more on the safer, more predictable side. And I remember like I was reading the mythology parts of this story and I was like, this is more interesting than what's going on right now. Which I don't know if necessarily is a fault of this book, or maybe just a personal preference of mine and what kind of fiction I'm attracted towards. But I did think it was interesting how Iris and Roman kind of were acting as parallels to Dacre and Enva, and kind of like, you know, the way their stories matched and contrasted each other. I thought that was clever, especially for a YA fantasy book. Maybe I just don't give YA fantasy enough credit. Like, I feel like they can be smart. They can be clever, you know? I've just read a lot of bad YA fantasy that I don't really have faith in that anymore, you know? I also do think kind of the magic in this world was a little bit underutilized. I feel like it's such an kind of interesting world to me because it's almost like magical realism, you know, like the humans in this story acknowledge that magic exists, but they don't really try to take advantage of it or claim it, which I feel like is often a fantasy trope, right? Most of the time the conflict in this fantasy world revolves around humans trying to take advantage of this magic present in their world, but that's not a thing here. The humans in this story don't care about the magic, they just kind of coexist with it, which I feel like fits magical realism more than anything. But yeah, I don't know. My gripe isn't with the book itself. It's just with the genre of this book because I'm so confused as to what it's supposed to be. And then one final tiny thing that I didn't really like about this book was the pacing of the events. More specifically, I feel like Roman should have struggled with memory loss longer. In fact, I was fully prepared for him to not remember anything for majority of the book. I was prepared for the angst, for the tears, for the struggling, and I feel like he got over it too quickly. Yes, I want him to be happy, of course, but I also want him to be miserable. That's why I bought this book, for the miserable angst, you know? And that's honestly exactly kind of the same criticism I had of Divine Rivals. It was marketed as this rivals to lovers book. Where was the rivals part, you know? It was like 50 pages of them being rivals at the Gazette, and then it was over and they were in love. And I was like, cool, like they're cute and all, but I wanted more fighting, you know? I wanted more banter, I wanted more back and forth, pa 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 pa, you know? And I wasn't given that. Another thing I would say is the letters were also underutilized. I feel like a big selling point of this book and this story is that they're connected through these magical typewriters, so they send these cute little lovey romantic letters to each other, and I just feel like we didn't get enough of that, you know? I was prepared for this book to be like maybe a third letters, because I feel like that's kind of the selling point of this book. That's kind of what anchors it into something original and something different. And I feel like the letters only showed up every once in a while. Other than that, those are my main criticisms. This book is very, very well done. I think there weren't many loose ends, and I mean there were some, but overall I think the book tied up really nicely in the end. I really, really loved the little epilogues at the end. I thought they were super duper cute and perfect for showing like the kind of peaceful, mundane love that Iris and Roman were always striving for but never able to get because of the current war that they were in. Moving on to part 3, characters and relationships. Okay, starting off with Iris. Loved her. Always loved me a strong, independent female protagonist. I feel like oftentimes when you have this super stubborn #girl boss YA female protagonist, it can come off very like pandering and surface level. But I think Rebecca Ross actually managed to write Iris as a strong female character with actual motivations and faults and nuance. I think her motivations themselves are definitely, you know, very basic and kind of tropey and whatever, but I feel like they feel true to her character, which again is kind of a sign of her strong writing more than anything. The one thing I will say, however, is I think that her relationship with Forrest is kind of funky. Like, It's not realistic at all. I don't have a brother, okay, but I do have a sister, and I promise you that is not how we talk to each other. That is not how siblings talk to each other. But I thought Forrest was her lover at first in Divine Rivals. I'm sorry, but if you're writing siblings, it should not have even the slightest undertone of romance. You know what I'm saying? Like the fact that Roman thought Forrest was her lover at first in Divine Rivals. Moving on to Roman, he's my baby girl. That's all that really needs to be said about his character. Him and Iris are super duper cute together. Love that every chance he gets, he uses the word wife, you know? He's like, oh, my wife Iris, like, she's my wife. I love her. She's my wife, you know? I don't know, that's just so cute, and I kind of love that trope. I usually hate married couple romances because I feel like they're so boring because you don't really feel the romance because it's already established, but like the way that the two of them are, it's like kind of cute, you know? And also like the fact that he falls in love with her again despite losing his memories, that's what I was looking for. That was what I was hoping for from the memory loss. I also just love that he straight up did not care that his father was going to die in prison, and he lived out the rest of his days with his mom, his grandma, and his wife. Like, he's such a feminist king. Moving on to part 4, final thoughts and opinions. Overall, like I've said, very, very good and pretty solid fantasy / historical fiction, whatever genre this is. And I honestly think it was better than Divine Rivals simply because the characters themselves felt more grounded in their goals and their relationships felt a little bit more natural and less manufactured. There were definitely still some issues I had with the pacing of the plot points, and I feel like the magic and mythology and the letters in this book were kind of underutilized, but the prose, absolutely beautiful. And honestly, what made this book and what makes this duology in general. I think Rebecca Ross is such a good author, and yeah, I don't know, I just love her writing style. Overall, I rated the book 4.6 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely recommend if you read Divine Rivals and aren't sure whether or not to read the sequel. Obviously recommend. If you've never read Divine Rivals, why are you watching this video? Why are you watching this video, bro? Like, you're gonna get spoilers. But if you haven't read it for some reason, obviously read it. It was really good. I totally recommend. But yeah, that's everything I wanted to talk about. I love reading fantasy books because they remind me a lot of the books I read growing up, and it kind of reawakens that love of reading in me, you know? If you watched the entire thing, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe only if you want to though, and I'll see you next time. Bye!